So this video is an attempt to put my thoughts together on Fortune's Weave. To start off, I want to preface the video by stating that at the time of publishing this, Fortune's Weave isn't out yet, so a lot of what I say here could age really badly, so take it with a grain of salt. We just don't have enough information yet, even after the direct, so ultimately this game concerns me. There's a lot about this game that raises my eyebrow and gives me an uneasy feeling about the implications this has for the Fire Emblem series as a whole. I'll go over some of the things about the game itself and then what is kind of concerning to me and the implications this game has for the franchise. So after the direct, IS revealed that we'd be able to switch between each of our four protagonists and experience their stories in parallel with each other. By itself, I'd say this is a good change. One of the bigger criticisms of Three Houses was how you needed to start a whole new save file to experience everyone's stories, and then having to repeat part one with all the same maps, even on a different route. So it looks like the devs are trying to save us time in that regard, but in that same direct, we're shown just how big the map is and how much there is to do, including finding weapons and other rewards, and this is where I scratch my head a bit. If, for instance, I'm playing as Kai and I want to complete a few dungeons and other things, but now I want to go switch to Lita, are those items transferring over, or do I need to go find them again now that I'm playing as Lita? If it's the first one, it's game breaking. I can intentionally progress one character's story to a certain point and then transfer all of my broken items and weapons to another character I haven't progressed as far. If it's the latter of the two, then it creates repetitiveness, and you're forcing the player to do the same thing multiple times, which can get boring really quickly. The world map looks like it'll grow the further you progress, unlocking more dungeons, side quests, and other things. This can be a good or a bad thing, depending on execution. Much like in a restaurant, if you have too many things on your menu, it becomes harder to control quality, and you can apply that same logic here. I think having too many dungeons and smaller things to do can create again another feeling of repetitiveness or feeling like a chore to do, especially when they lack any sort of challenge, rewards, or story beats. It also makes me wonder how they'll handle paralogs, something that's been a staple of the series and usually acts as a way to recruit new characters, expand on existing ones, or extend the story in meaningful but inconsequential ways if you skip them. Looking at how much content there is on the world map and how many different stories we will be able to experience, I worry that some of that more meaningful content, which usually came in a lesser quantity, got pushed to the wayside. Oh boy, this one's probably most hotly contested. Personally, I think Faye shoulders a lot of the blame for introducing guns to the series, and I personally hate the idea of guns in a series that's most recognized for swords and magic. I think this type of stuff should be relegated to spin off games only. I know Three Houses incorporated technology into it too, and Fortune's Weave takes place in the same universe, but I still feel uneasy about their inclusion in a game defined by medieval fantasy elements. Then there's the character customization UI. Mean, what the hell is this? This does not look like Fire Emblem at all. If you showed me this with no context and asked what game it was from, I'd guess some new sci-fi fantasy title akin to like Monster Hunter. Fire Emblem would be my last answer. Three Houses was already pushing it for me in terms of the technology that they had, but this feels like we're going too far, and I don't like the precedent it sets for future installments. Once we have guns, why not tanks next? At that point, we're just dealing with an Advance Wars clone, or another series that I want to talk about. This piggybacks off the previous segment, but I feel like Fire Emblem is becoming a medieval version of Persona. Ever since Three Houses with the school setting and calendar system, and then we have Engage with the emblems, and now Fortune's Weave with another kind of calendar system, guns, and turn based combat and sections of the game that feels more reminiscent of Persona and the other type of turn based RPGs out there. Even some enemies in the game look like they were ripped straight out of a Persona title. I should note, I haven't played any Persona games myself, but I have played Metaphor and watched videos on some of the Persona games, so I have a sort of surface level idea of how those operate. I'm not wholly opposed to these influences, but I think they should stay in spin offs while mainline games stick to the core identity of the series, a tactical turn based game rooted in medieval fantasy. I think this shift started with Three Houses, which brought in a lot of Persona fans and newer fans in general to the series, which of course means more revenue. And the relative letdown of Engage, I think, pushed IS further toward incorporating more of the Persona style RPG format that they tend to go by. And this bothers me because if I wanted to play a Persona game, I'd go play one. I like Fire Emblem because its gameplay is distinct and unlike a lot of the other RPGs out there, so watching it follow Persona's playbook just kind of pisses me off, honestly. So this segment's gonna function as sort of a lightning round of other concerns I have about the game. First is the character designs. A lot of these I don't like, or I just feel kind of meh about, and especially on Theodora's side of the story, and I don't really like the gray skin tone. I've never liked it, and I'd rather they just gave them a skin tone like Esmerelle does. Second is the shoehorning of a true protagonist. It just feels kind of cheap, and I was hoping we would just stick with the four characters that we started with. Third, I worry about how they'll handle romances. I think this game could get by without them, but this more modern romance mechanic that we've had since Awakening, it's part of the series now. I don't expect it to be left out. My concern is with how they are going to handle it. You either should commit to the romance options or don't. Don't tiptoe around ambiguous relationships between characters like the way Engage did. And this applies especially to Eshmel because they're revealed kind of later in the game as the protagonist, so giving them player selectable romance options would feel forced given their role in the story as like this divine intervention, like this physical manifestation of Sothis' divine intervention. I think they should either have a single kind of canon romance like Marth and Sita, or no romance at all. Fourth is the people versus Nintendo, so thanks to their repeated business practices and recent legal battles, Nintendo isn't viewed very positively right now, right? We had that whole lawsuit situation going on with Power World, and then Nintendo raising the prices of games and price hikes on the Switch too. This could potentially hurt game sales. Fifth is prequel versus sequel. Either way, you're gonna upset someone, but I think the prequel is the lesser of two evils. But if the calendar shown in the direct matches the Fodlan calendar, then we're going to be dealing with a sequel, and that itself opens up a ton of a ton of can of worms about character lineages and who won in Three Houses. Six is the body type controversy, and not necessarily that big of a controversy, but certainly something that is being discussed a bit right now. This is probably the smallest concern, not a deal breaker for me, or for I think most of the fan base, but there's pockets in the fan base that are either very much against this or very much for this, and they're going to kind of butt heads on this. I'm not wholly against it. I don't think I could be, just because I've played other games that have the more body type AB mechanic, like Baldur's Gate, and then Power World has it too. But if I had to choose, I would rather just have the male female option. But since there's like this socio-political kind of culture war debate around this, you're gonna have people that are gonna be arguing over it, and I think you're just kind of creating unnecessary controversy by including it. So I don't think this game will fail, not at all. At the bare minimum, it's gonna surpass Engage in sales, if only due to like name recognition, like with the connection to Three Houses. What worries me, as I said earlier, is the shift in how the game kind of plays, or how some of the mechanics in the game function, and whether Fire Emblem is losing that identity it was founded on. It feels telling that when I look at a game like Unicorn Overlord, which is a game that plays nothing like Fire Emblem, it has more of that Fire Emblem feel than recent mainline entries do. I don't know how else to say it. If you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. I think IS could have easily leaned into older games through remakes, like the way Echoes did with taking Gaiden and turning it into Shadows of Valentia, especially with the games that haven't been released yet in the West, so FE4, 5, and 6. And given characters like Sigurd's and Roy's popularity thanks to things like Smash and Engage and Fire Emblem Heroes, I think we're kind of missing out on an opportunity here to capitalize on their popularity while they're kind of at their best, especially Sigurd's. IS is in the middle of a classic business dilemma now that they've grown. So, how much do you cater to the wider, more normie audience versus the diehard fans who've stuck around since the GBA era? I'm not gonna say, fuck the normies or anything. You ultimately need new audiences for the business to grow. But it does change what Fire Emblem means to different corners of the fan base and the overall perception of what a Fire Emblem game is. I see Fortune's Weave as something similar to Pokemon X and Y. Those games followed the Unova entries of Pokemon, which are very well liked entries, but X and Y were noticeably weaker on difficulty, villains, rivals, and story. And in hindsight, X and Y are where the cracks started to show, and the series has arguably been on a quality decline ever since. I worry Fortune's Weave could mark a similar turning point for Fire Emblem, given everything it's bringing in at once, and that this kind of overloading of content covered earlier is part of that same erosion and not a separate issue. So, as I said at the start, the game isn't out yet. We don't know everything, but what I see right now worries me. There's a lot being packed into this game that feels like a break from what Fire Emblem is. They're introducing guns and more technology and continuing to kind of follow in the shadow of Persona. I'll admit, I'm someone who's naturally hesitant to change, so I was always going to have some skepticism going in, but I haven't felt this worried about a Fire Emblem game since really ever. And I hope the mechanics of this game stay within the Three Houses universe. I'd like to see IS move on from milking Fodlan and the other continents in this universe in favor of revisiting older games or making another new title that kind of recaptures that feeling of the older games. But who knows? Maybe after playing it, I'll feel differently. I guess we'll find out September 17th, but what do you think? Do you share my worries, or am I overthinking it? Let me know in the comments, and with that, goodbye.